we can represent a ratio as a fraction, a decimal, or a percentage. If we're given a percentage 72.5% and we want to convert it into a fraction, the first thing that's helpful to remember is that percentage means out of 100. So we can take the percentage 72.5 and make it into a fraction by dividing it by 100. So we have a fraction, but we have a little bit of an issue in the numerator. We're not allowed to have a decimal in either the numerator or denominator of a fraction. So we're going to multiply the top and the bottom by 10, and we're going to get 725 out of 1,000. So I just took the decimal point and I moved it over one spot, and I took the bottom and I moved the decimal place over one spot and got 1,000. Now I can look to reduce this. 725 out of 1,000. You might look at that and think I could divide by 5 because I see that the last digit in the numerator and the denominator, I have a 5 on the top and a 0 on the bottom, is a prime candidate to divide by 5. So we could do that and then divide by 5 again. Or I'm noticing that I can divide top and bottom both by 25. And this gives us 29 over 40. So that's my fraction in lowest terms. The next thing I want to be able to do is to write this as a decimal. 29 divided by 40 gives us 0.725. So that's one way to start. If I know the fraction, I can just divide numerator divided by denominator to get the decimal. I can also take 72.5 out of 100, my percentage, and I can think, how do I get this out of 1? Because a decimal represents how much out of 1. So if I divide by 100, I will get my decimal out of 1. And 72.5 out of 100 means slide the decimal place 2 to the left. So I'm going to end up with 0.725 out of 1. So 0.725 is my decimal. Percentage is 72.5%. And my fraction is 29 out of 40. The next example gives us 1.3 as our decimal. This is actually more than a whole, because remember that 1.3 is out of one whole. To get the percentage, we have to multiply top and bottom by 100, because we know percentage means out of 100. So if I multiply 1.3 by 100, that means slide the decimal place 2 places to the right, and take the 1 on the bottom and do the same thing. Multiply it by 100, and that's going to add 2 zeros. So 130 out of 100, which is 130%. That is more than 100% or more than a whole. As a fraction, I already have 130 out of 100, which is a fraction, of course. But in lowest terms, I can divide top and bottom by 10. And I end up with 13 out of 10. So my fraction then is going to be 13 out of 10. My decimal is 1.3 out of 1, or 1.3, and my percentage is 130%. In the last example, we are given the fraction 7 divided by 16, or 7 out of 16. It's easy to convert it to a decimal because you'll remember you just take the numerator and you divide it by the denominator. 7 divided by 16 gives us 0.4375. So that gives us 0.4375 out of a whole. So we could put that out of 1 if we wanted to express it as a fraction. And writing it like that makes sense. All we're doing is dividing top and bottom by 16. Now, of course, to get it as a percentage, we want to think of a percentage out of 100. We want to take 1 and multiply it by 100, which means we also want to take 0.437 and multiply it by 100. That's just sliding the decimal place. So 43.75. We're taking our decimal here and we're sliding it over 2 to the right. That makes 43.75 out of 100 when we multiply top and bottom by 100. So our percentage then is 43.75%. Our decimal is 0.4375. And our fraction is 7 out of 16, or 7/16.